Today, I wanted to look back at Daniel Prokopchuk versus Mindaugas Tarasidis. Now, I think that Mindaugas is clearly the GOAT of arm wrestling, but in all seriousness, I think he's really good at setting up. This is a classic match between a hook puller and a top roller. It's all about if Daniel can get his wrist bent and isolate Mindaugas' arm and make the match about arm strength, and of course, Mindaugas wants the exact opposite thing to happen. So the first thing that I noticed Mindaugas doing super well is the separation he is creating between their wrists in the setup. So notice right here how we can see that there is a significant gap between Mindaugas' wrist and between Daniel's wrist. He is denying that access to the arm-on-arm power. Daniel's going to try to cut and he's going to try to chop down on the bicep of Mindaugas, but this separation between both of their wrists is going to make that really difficult. It's going to make Daniel have to actually wrist curl his opponent in order to get that arm isolation instead of just having access to it immediately. If their wrists were touching, if they were connected, then there's a much higher chance of Daniel just getting that arm-on-arm contact right off the go. But this way, he's really going to have to work for it. He's going to have to earn it. So what we're going to see is that Daniel is constantly going to be reaching. We see a little false start here, and notice how immediately Daniel tries to lift his elbow and get a deeper grip. He wants to get around Mindaugas' arm. He wants that wrist-on-wrist contact to occur. And of course, Mindaugas wants to prevent that at all costs. He's trying to keep that separation between his wrist and Daniel's wrist there. And then upon the actual go of the match, he does a pretty good job, although Daniel is able to close that gap just a little bit. There's maybe a little bit less space in between their wrists than there was initially. But still, off of the go of the match, we see that it is enough that Daniel does not have arm-on-arm contact. If we look closely here, we can see that Daniel's pinky finger is the weak point. He doesn't get that shooting past kind of thing. He isn't able to get over the top of Mindaugas' arm and chop down on his bicep, but the match is still very much so in the hand and in the wrist. Now, there's another really interesting concept, and that is that in general, a hook puller is probably going to be in a better spot than a top roller because the top roller is relying very heavily on musculature. They need their elbow flexor to be strong enough to crack that wrist back. So traditionally, when you see two athletes stuck in a position like this, Daniel doesn't really have what he wants and Mindaugas doesn't really have what he wants either. You're going to tend to favor the hook puller. And this is because he's using far more connective tissue and bone structure, and that's not going to get tired, whereas Mindaugas is using traditionally would be using a lot more elbow flexor, and that's going to get tired. But something that Mindaugas does really well that isn't orthodox is we notice him right off the bat using a lot of almost arm break position side pressure. We notice him bumping sideways. So he's really trying to avoid using that elbow flexor because that's going to gas out over time. And he's trying to use a lot more connective tissue as well. So we kind of see both guys relying super heavily on that bone structure, and Mindaugas is really, as the match goes on, he's getting more and more into break arm position. Here you can see he's totally turned away. His hand is beginning to go outside of his shoulder, and this is a really ugly position. This is not orthodox at all. He's pretty much facing the referee at this point in terms of his overall body orientation. If he was still using a lot of elbow flexor and just straight up pressure, he would be gassing out much faster than Daniel would be, but he's not doing that. And you can see even more so right here, Mindaugas is literally facing straight sideways. He probably is incorporating even more side pressure than Daniel is, and Daniel is the hook puller. And we see that as time goes on, the match gets worse and worse for Daniel. As far as the hand battle goes, the side pressure connective tissue battle is pretty similar, but it just keeps getting worse and worse as far as the hand battle goes, and eventually Mindaugas is able to get all the way over the top and finish the match. So I thought that this was a great example. If you're trying to figure out how to prevent your opponent from hooking you, watch Mindaugas Tarasidis setup. His setup is just about perfect for trying to prevent a hook puller from getting inside. I think he was the weaker guy here, yet he was still able to win. And in addition to that, he does this really interesting strategy where he is incorporating so much break arm position. That's probably not something you should do, but I did find it interesting. So let me know what you guys thought about this match, but I thought that this was a near perfect performance from Mindaugas Tarasidis, demonstrating how to prevent your opponent from hooking you.